This is a replica of the 1830 first edition of the Book of Mormon. When this book first appeared in print, it generated some opposition. Joseph Smith, of course, claimed that he translated the Book of Mormon from a set of ancient golden plates. The book itself purports to be an ancient record written by multiple prophets on the ancient American continent. But for skeptics of Joseph Smith's claims, there had to be some other answer for how he produced this 588-page book. One early critic named Alexander Campbell was confident that never was a book more evidently written by one set of fingers, nor more certainly conceived in one cranium since the first book appeared in the human language than the Book of Mormon. Seems simple enough, right? Joseph Smith, the ignorant con man, wrote the book himself. Case closed. Well, not really. As Brigham Young University professor Daniel C. Peterson noted, the fact was that the perfect ignoramus Joe Smith had actually produced a substantial and complex book. Moreover, he and his book were acquiring a solid and numerous following. How could this be accounted for? Because critics couldn't reconcile the picture of an unlearned Joseph Smith simply writing the Book of Mormon by himself, they set off to see who could come up with a plausible counter-explanation for the origin of the Book of Mormon. The first and most popular counter-explanation came to be known as the Spalding-Rigdon theory. According to this theory, Sidney Rigdon, an early convert to the Restored Church of Jesus Christ, secretly stole an unpublished manuscript from a man named Solomon Spaulding and gave it to Joseph Smith, who then palmed off this manuscript with his own additions as the Book of Mormon. This theory was so popular among critics in Joseph Smith's day that it practically became the standard skeptical explanation for the origins of the Book of Mormon for decades. The Spalding theory, however, eventually lost favor when Spalding's original manuscript was recovered in 1884 and was seen to bear little resemblance to the Book of Mormon. Historians now consider the Spalding theory a dead issue and not credible enough to base a theory of Book of Mormon authorship on. So if Joseph Smith didn't steal Solomon Spalding's manuscript, then how else might he have produced the Book of Mormon? Around the turn of the 20th century, some scholars began suggesting that Joseph derived the contents of the Book of Mormon from his own environment. One book in particular, View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith, no relation to Joseph, became a popular candidate as a source of plagiarism or influence on Joseph. First published in 1823, View of the Hebrews is essentially an extended argument for why the modern Native Americans are descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, which was already a popular theory in the early 19th century. Some authors have argued for parallels between the content of the Book of Mormon and View of the Hebrews, which they say shows signs of plagiarism. As with the Spalding theory, however, there are some serious problems with the theory that Joseph Smith plagiarized View of the Hebrews. For one thing, there's no direct evidence that Joseph Smith was familiar with the contents of View of the Hebrews at the time of the translation of the Book of Mormon. In addition, none of Joseph Smith's contemporary critics ever considered View of the Hebrews as a potential source of plagiarism, which is strange if the books are so obviously similar as some have argued. This would indicate that the supposed parallels between the two sources aren't actually as readily obvious as some have suggested. Finally, Joseph Smith himself, while acting as editor of the newspaper The Times and Seasons, approvingly republished a quotation from View of the Hebrews as evidence for the Book of Mormon's authenticity. This is not the kind of behavior you'd expect from a shrewd con man. Besides all of this, other scholars have pointed out significant stylistic and conceptual differences between the Book of Mormon and View of the Hebrews. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints itself considers the parallels between the two books so weak and non-threatening that its own flagship university, Brigham Young University, published its own edition of View of the Hebrews in 1996 for all to freely examine and compare. So if Joseph didn't steal Solomon Spalding's manuscript or Ethan Smith's ideas, what other possible explanations might there be? Well, in recent years, a new theory has emerged which posits that Joseph Smith most likely grew up reading a school book called The Late War by Gilbert J. Hunt, and it heavily influenced his writing of the Book of Mormon. Published in 1816, the late war between the United States and Great Britain gave an account of the War of 1812 that was intended to be an educational textbook for schoolchildren. To support the idea that Joseph Smith drew from this book in fabricating the Book of Mormon, some authors have pointed to parallels between the two books, including over 100 rare phrases that bind the Book of Mormon to the late war. But like the Solomon Spaulding and Ethan Smith theories, this explanation suffers from many glaring problems. As demonstrated by recent statistical analysis, the similarities and linguistic parallels between the Book of Mormon and the late war are more easily explainable as shared imitation of the language of the King James Bible and not direct literary dependence. Beyond this, others have pointed out that many of the parallels typically listed between the two books are actually rather weak. These problems with the late war theory indicate that, in all likelihood, rather than the Book of Mormon flagrantly plagiarizing Hunt's work, the two books emerged alongside each other in a shared early American literary culture. Those who disbelieve Joseph Smith's claims will naturally find ways to explain away the miraculous origin of the Book of Mormon. But it bears repeating the point raised by Apostle John A. Widtsoe in 1951. Unbelievers in Joseph Smith's story have not been able to agree on any one explanation. It has even been necessary by some writers to change the explanation they first proposed. This unsuccessful, changing search is of itself an evidence of the truth of the prophet's own story. Arguments that the Book of Mormon was derived from some other 19th century book do not adequately explain its features. For example, its astounding narrative complexity, literary elegance, profound theology, and authentic ancient characteristics. Nor do such arguments account for the circumstances of its coming forth, including its rapid dictation, lack of revisions, and the testimonies of those who handled the plates and beheld the angel. The weight of the combined evidence affirms that the Book of Mormon is unlike any other 19th century work, and is in fact an authentic ancient text. If any of you are curious to read Solomon Spaulding's manuscript, or Ethan Smith's view of the Hebrews, or the late war, you can access them for free on the Book of Mormon Central Archive by following the links in the description.